And what's up, nerds? Brendan, the nerd of many faces here, joined, of course, by my dear friend Shane Holly at FDScosplay. Shane, both you and I are going to have a very hard time in terms of this podcast tonight, considering we're talking Star Wars.
Oh yeah,
and
I cannot wait.
And we can talk Star Wars for hours, if not days. We could probably discuss Star Wars till the cows come home, as the old adage goes, or should it be as the nerfs come home?
The nerfs come home. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Just a little bit, I think. Hope you guys enjoyed our last episode of WandaVision. I was super pleased with what they did. And for a series finale, I couldn't have asked for anything more. I was so pleased that, I was so happy that in some cases I was right, but I'm not going to tell you in which I was right on. Go watch the series. It's fantastic and everything else. But let's get to talking Star Wars, because there's a lot of Star Wars stuff coming out there. But to help us travel this galaxy far, far away, we have a very special guest. He's a dear friend of you and mine. We have Mr. Lee Kohse. He does fantastic Star Wars art. I can let him get more into what it is that he does for, I believe, LucasFilm. He'll correct me if I'm wrong. And let's go ahead and get Lee on in here. Hello and welcome, Lee. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
By the way, if I'm sniffling or sneezing or something like that, I have allergies, and I took a face full of pollen like an hour ago, and it's just been killing me.
Oh no!
So,
did you like fall into some flowers? It's like I'm kind of interested in the story here.
No, I was clean. I was doing some yard work. I spent the last couple of months like doing a lot of yard work and housework and stuff, trying to get things done around here. Weeds are really easy to pull after a rain when the ground is nice and soft from a few rains. So, and unfortunately, I just in the process of trying to fill the bin, I took a face full. And, now I'm sitting here just like, okay, I've got all my allergy pills in me, but I occasionally catch myself sniffling, so I apologize in advance.
No worries. All right, well, we're talking Star Wars today, and that's one of the main reasons why we have
for me.
So can you go through and give us a brief synopsis about what it is that you do for the Star Wars universe as a whole?
Sure. Most of the stuff I do is I do a lot of different stuff for different licensors for Star Wars, for Lucasfilm. I'm a freelance artist, so I am not a Lucasfilm employee directly, but I am a freelancer for them. A significant chunk of their illustrators are freelancers, and we all there's art on everything. So it'll be on action figures, it's on books, book covers, bookmarks, licensed jelly beans, just whatever, whoever's licensed something from Star Wars, at some point they're going to need graphics or something from it, and that's where someone like me would come in. And so most of the stuff I'm known for is the stuff like in the Disney Art Gallery. So if you go to Disneyland and you go to Launch Bay, or I don't know if D Street's even still there, but like at the D Street Gallery or any of the Disney galleries like that, you would see my oil paintings and prints of my oil paintings. So that's what you see behind me.
Of which I have not seen, because I have never been to Disneyland yet.
Oh no!
Well, the Obi-Wan behind me actually isn't actually there. That's actually a rejected painting.
It's a rejected painting that probably, in terms of a rejected painting, how much would you say the value of that is?
About $6,000.
Wow.
Damn.
And then, but it's it's also well, that particular painting, just to kind of talk about like some of the stuff we go through, is that piece was actually commissioned under George Lucasfilm. So when the art director back then was like, we really like to have a nice Sir Alec Guinness Obi-Wan doing something. Obi-Wan's really popular, let's do something with Sir Alec Guinness. And so I did this painting behind me, which is Obi-Wan fighting off Tuscan Raiders. But then Disney bought the company, and because there was so much issues with the what's canon, what wasn't canon.
Yep.
And it came out kind of like right after Disney bought Lucasfilm that there was a significant percentage of the Star Wars fandom had never seen Star Wars, but they had seen Robot Chicken, or they had seen,
okay,
or they had seen like Family Guy, and so they knew of Star Wars, but they thought Star Wars was a comedy, and because of that brand confusion at a time when Disney was like, we just spent like several $1 billion, we kind of need to unscrew this somehow, or make sure that people know what we're about. So they pretty much killed anything, or at least put it on hold, anything that wasn't Disney canon. So if it didn't happen in the films or animation, it kind of got put on the back burner or kiboshed. And that's kind of what happened to this piece. Is I had just, it took me a while because I finished it right at the buy-in, but then it was almost like 2 years. 3 years had gone by, and me periodically bugging art directors like, what's with this painting? Like, it's been sitting in my studio doing nothing forever, because I also can't show it until I hear back from them. And at some point they said, it's like, yeah, because of the issue of canon, what's not canon, we're gonna pass on this one for now. But now with the Ewan McGregor show, if he fights a Tuscan Raider, maybe I can resubmit it. So you never know.
Well, that's fantastic, and thank you again for taking the time to join us here today. So we're gonna get
I gave a really good in-depth what I do for them, which is paintings, praying, and then more paintings.
All right, and so I know that this is kind of a hot button topic for everybody right now. A lot of people in the Star Wars universe, the fandom, and everything else. And that's the current firing of Gina Carano from future Lucasfilm projects. Shane, why don't you, it's like, we'll just go around. Shane, why don't you start us off and give us your opinion?
Yeah, we're all free to say what we want to say, but when you work for a company that's a high profile, like Lucasfilm, Disney, Marvel, Warner Brothers, it could be Universal, it doesn't really matter who it is, right? It could even be just, like me, just a daily, 9 to 5 retail job, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's certain things how you're supposed to hold yourself, right?
Yeah.
I understand, we get it, social media, freedom of speech and stuff like that. We can get a whole long drawn out thing, right? But when you are constantly saying things and doing things that go against what that company, basically kind of believes in, right? Or what their policies are as an employee, it's the best way to explain it for people. You're gonna get in trouble regardless, so even if it comes to a point to where it's coming up and you're in the middle of a contract negotiation and you have all these things behind you that have led up to this point, and then you say something, let's say the day before you go into for your negotiations for your contract, they're gonna cut that contract because you're no more of value to them, you're more of a problem, and you're basically giving them a bad name. So you become a liability, right?
Yeah.
So you know, did I like her? Did I like her character? Absolutely. You know, I thought Cara Dune was a great character to bring to the screen to give a strong female presence in a predominantly male universe, right? With Star Wars. Is she going to be missed? Probably yes and no. We'll see. You know, it's time will tell. I mean, you've got some other characters that are in there and in the series now that can take over that, can take that torch and run with it. So, yeah, it's kind of a hard subject because you know it's like, yeah, I always try and look at things, whether it's, you know, movies, politics, whatever. I try and see both sides of things, right? I try and give everybody the benefit of the doubt because that's just the type of person that I am. You know, I am a very kind-hearted, very, you know, forgiving person, you know, but there's just certain things that you do and that you don't do in a business to become that liability. And once you become that liability, there's no coming back from that. If that, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Lee, what is your, I mean, as the person who has been employed by Lucasfilm before, what is your take on this situation? And you know, I know that this is your opinion.
I'm a hot potato too. Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat as Shane. So, everybody has the right to their opinion. And you know, but one of the things I am personally not a fan of is I don't like hyperbole. So I don't like it when people say someone is the devil or someone is, you know, if you know, sometimes there's certain comparisons that shouldn't be made. And it's also one of the things for me was I'm personally not a fan. If you look back on, because obviously, so her tweet or Instagram thing or whatever was actually in relation to the Jewish people and, you know, their suffering, and comparing that to modern Republicans. And without going too in depth about it, you know, that to me, that hit me as, you know, extreme hyperbole, because if you know anything about the Jewish people, they have been essentially victimized for millennia. Yeah. You know, not just, you know, a couple of years, you know, but thousands of years, and they have been hunted down and killed and things like that. It's not cool. And, you know, do I think that it's something that she should have been fired for? No, probably not. I don't think so. I mean, but I'm also, that's, again, it's how much of a liability does somebody who makes such a hyperbole or such a comparison, you know, become? And, you know, but it's, you know, so I'm not, but I'm kind of, so do I think, you know, again, do I think she should have been fired? My personal feeling, I'm kind of on the fence about it. I don't really know if it was justified cause to be fired per se for that. I don't know how many warnings she'd received in the past. So if she'd been getting warnings, it's like, you know, tone it down a bit, you know, extreme hyperbole. Okay, there you go. You know, then I understand. Because, you know, it's one of those things where you get warnings, and if you don't, you know, abide by those warnings, then yeah, you're not abiding by the company policy. They have every right to let you go. But I also, again, the thing I don't like about hyperbole is because things like hyperbole eventually starts to lead to purity testing, and which is kind of where I kind of see things heading right now. And this is why these type of topics bug the crap out of me. Babylon 5 had an awesome episode. I think it was called Infection or Infestation or something like that. But it had it was about an alien device that a xenoarchaeologist brought back from another planet and snuck it past customs. And this thing was basically a biomechanical device that would attach itself to someone or some, you know, a biological life form, and then take it over and slowly rewrite its DNA to an alien race called the Akarans, I believe. And essentially what it would do is it would then go through and execute everybody who wasn't a pure Akaran. The problem was And so it was no such thing as a pure Karn because it was an ideological place. Like people who had an ideology set the standards. And that's not the people who should be setting standards. So it sounds really weird, but I think this Babylon 5 episode is a great example. It's a metaphor, essentially for what we're kind of going through in our own politics nowadays. Is, I know so many people who grew up as Reaganite Republicans who will not pass a Republican litmus test nowadays. Reagan wouldn't pass a litmus test nowadays. So yeah, so it's kind of why I don't like these kind of things. I'm not a big fan of the cancel culture. I'm a big fan of boycotting. There are companies that I boycott. There's certain things I don't endorse or I don't use or whatever, and I won't go out of my way to sign a petition and say these people need to be shut down. I would just if I see something on television or hear something on a podcast, I just change it. I just won't endorse that channel. I won't give them any of my effort or any of my money or anything like that. And if they keep popping up in my feed, I look for the place where I can say, ignore this channel type stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I do that.
So, speaking where... I'm
trying to tell everybody else, hey, you need to cancel this person. I'm really against that just in general because, again, it leads to that same thing. It leads to that Akaran metaphor, essentially, that you're not pure. So therefore, you need to be eliminated. And so I really, that's kind of it's an extreme point of view, but it really is kind of where things are heading. Because if you look at how it used to be a boycott, now it's cancel culture. And
yeah,
I'm okay with boycotting. I'm just, the idea of shutting people down with cancel culture bugs me. So
yeah,
hope that helps.
I mean, yeah,
but
No, definitely it's a touchy subject. And I mean, in terms of my opinion in regards to this, it does, I will say it's like, it does suck that Hollywood, whomever it is, Hollywood actors almost need to
If only they had a company or somebody to handle social media for them.
I know, right? If they had somebody to handle social media for them, or basically it comes down to public relations.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen in the past years, Twitter, Instagrams, it's like any social media company basically be a loudspeaker for certain people's opinions. And now it's to the point where it's like, okay, that loudspeaker is loud enough to reach around the world, and you're gonna get a response from people around the world. Not. I mean, do I think what she says was a little bit insensitive? Yes. That topic is not up for debate. Do I believe that she should have been fired over it? I mean, I don't know. That's kind of one of those things where it's like out of context. It's like, if it's this one thing, okay, warn her, fine her, do whatever. But if it was like you said, Lee, if they go through and they have been warning her time and time again, and this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, then okay. Now, would I be opposed to her coming back if she makes an apology? I mean, if she pulls the James Gunn, essentially, I would not be opposed.
If I may, not to cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
You gave me my time already, but like with James Gunn, because I actually had this conversation with somebody on my Twitch channel who came in and basically was talking about how, well, why aren't we, why did James Gunn get rehired? And it's like, well, because this all happened over a decade ago, I believe, the tweets in question. But he not only deleted them, and he did it of his own, cognition. He wasn't told to do it. Nobody came down on him. Nobody threatened to, fire him if he didn't behave. He deleted them on his own, on his own. And then he had a decade of essentially good behavior to back it up. And so when these things were dug up and, there was a group of people, and this is, again, why I hate the cancel culture thing, because, it's a small group of people can make a lot of noise.
Yep.
And that may not be the majority opinion. and of a fandom or something. And so when these people got something trending, essentially they got him fired.
Yeah.
But when other fans were stood up and basically were like, well, wait a minute, he hasn't said anything bad for over a decade. Why are you holding him, accountable for something that he clearly learned his lesson about?
And he was also it's like he held himself accountable too and apologized for the tweets that he made. I mean, it's like he went through and said, what I said was in very bad taste. I am sorry for what I said. Please do not hold it against me because I am a different person now than what I was 10 years ago.
Exactly. And that's kind of what it comes down to is it recurring behavior or did they learn their lesson? So in this case, James Gunn learned his lesson. And again, I really liked the Cara Dune character. And the funny thing is I liked it for the weirdest reason. And it's like, she was, everybody was like, oh, it's good to see a strong female character. It's great to see a strong female character who's not a size 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was, she is an attractive, beautiful woman, but she is not a petite little supermodel looking, person. So
every single one of us would be scared to run into her in a dark alley.
Yeah, she kicked my ass. That was great. So, it's yeah, I really do. But that's what I liked about her is she wasn't a picture perfect Barbie doll action superstar kind of character.
She wasn't the Disney princess that we have essentially grown accustomed to.
Her character was just a good-natured badass, and I really liked that. And that said, I also kind of feel the same way about Katie Sackhoff. So she can do the same thing. So I don't really think that the role was that critical in the show that losing her necessarily throws a huge wrench in things. It's not like she was, Grogu or, Ahsoka or, Ahsoka only appeared in the one episode really, but, but because she has so much backstory behind her from the Clone Wars else and all the comics and whatnot, so that character has a lot of gravitas behind it. So whereas Cara Dune hadn't quite established that yet. So I personally hope she doesn't get recast. I would rather see them bring in another character to fill that role or use Katie Sackhoff, and then at such time that Cara Dune, if Disney decides that Gina Carano is no longer a liability to them, bring her back.
Yeah, no, it's like, and what I guess to finish my point, it's like we're talking about characters, her character not being recast and possibly bringing something into her role. I like the character of Cara Dune as well. Strong, not size 4. Yeah, that badass, where it's like that fight scene in the cantina where she fights Sasha Banks, and I'm like, damn, this is awesome. And the reservation that I have, I mean, and people can disagree with me or agree with me, what have you, I don't know if she was strong enough to carry her own show, because and granted, that's because of what I have seen her in. She has been the sidekick. She has been the sidekick in Deadpool to Francis.
Supporting character.
Yeah, she's been a supporting character. She hasn't had her own show yet. And maybe because Disney also, did they announce that they canceled Marshals of the New Republic?
No, they haven't said anything about that yet.
Okay, they haven't said anything. Okay, so I don't. And
Rangers of the New Republic, they haven't.
Oh, Rangers, thank you.
Yeah, and I don't. The other thing is though is that was fan supposition, I believe, that was going to be Cara Dune's show.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, nothing official came out from Lucasfilm saying that was actually a vehicle for Gina Carano. So
okay.
Or for the Cara Dune character. So yeah, I think they're going to focus more on kind of like what's going on in the Outer Rim. But we can talk about that later. I'm sure it'll come up.
Yeah. All right. we have gotten through the quote unquote nasty topic.
All right, guys, great show.
Awesome, thanks for coming.
So, I guess let's go around and tell and like say how we got into Star Wars.
Oh Jesus.
And it's like, and considering that my story is probably going to be the shortest, I will go first.
There you go.
I was in the 5th or 6th grade. I don't remember exactly what it was or when it was, but we had homeroom for about an hour each day. It basically was like a study hall type thing. And we earned points to watch a movie and have pizza for over lunch. And so we had earned enough points to get this, and then it's like, okay, we're gonna watch Star Wars on VHS. And I was like glued to the story. I was fascinated by all the characters, just everything about it was fantastic. I then started reading Star Wars books. It got me into reading and writing a whole lot more and everything else. And then I just enjoyed them even more when my parents got me the 20th anniversary edition on VHS. I think it's the 20th anniversary that they came out. It was the 23rd
silver box one.
Yeah, my parents got me the gold box, so I got it in.
Okay.
So I got it for.
Oh wait, no, one was widescreen, one was full screen.
Yeah.
Full screen. Yep.
That's the gold and silver. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the gold is full screen, the silver is widescreen, which people are like, widescreen is better, and I'm like, I didn't know such things until way later on in my life. So, but that is how I became a fan of Star Wars. It's like I'm a huge fan of Legos. I built a makeshift B-wing out of Legos. I mean, it wasn't really screen accurate or anything like that, but it's like, hey, look, the thing.
You mean a screen accurate B-wing out of Legos? Hey, that's a lot of Legos. That's impressive.
So that's how I got my love of Star Wars and everything else. Lee, why don't you go ahead and tell us, or actually wait, no, we'll have Lee go last this time. Shane, you'll go next.
Oh God. Started a long time ago. No.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, it started when I was 5 years old. I believe that was the first time that I saw Star Wars in a theater. No, I was 4. 1980. Because back then you had movies in theaters. It didn't have like a certain like shelf date when it got taken out and stuff like they do nowadays. So when Empire came out in 1980, they had shown A New Hope before that. Like it was like a month or so before that. My mom took me to go see it. Now, I saw it originally when it first came out in 1977, but I was only 9 months old, so I don't remember that. I just remember my parents telling me that. Yeah, and so 1 month I saw A New Hope in theaters, and then in May 1980 I saw Empire Strikes Back, and that movie. Now, I'm going to throw my mom under the bus here because I love her very dearly, and she ruined the movie for me and me and my cousin. We went to the movies. We're watching Empire Strikes Back. Now, the parents went and saw it the night before. They took us the next day, and both our moms leaned over to us and was like, Darth Vader's Luke's father.
Oh.
In the theater, loud enough for people to hear that hadn't seen the movie, and we've never let them live that down.
Mm.
But
spoiler alert.
right. That movie though.
Your mom was Twitter.
Right. Exactly. So, but that movie there, I mean, it started all. I mean, Empire's my all-time favorite film. To me, it's the greatest film in the history of cinema. I mean, it's what started my path down the dark side. You know, I'm not. And when I was younger, I was all about Luke. Like, I mean, you can't see it behind me, but there's like a cabinet, like literally right behind me, right here, and it's Darth Vader on the top, Luke Skywalker in the middle, Kylo Ren in the at the bottom. And it's funny because from the age of 4 to, I would say, probably about 14, I was all about Luke Skywalker. I wanted to be Luke Skywalker. I wanted to be a Jedi. I wanted to run around with a green lightsaber or a blue lightsaber, and from there. And all of a sudden, my brain switched over. I guess it might have been puberty or something like that. And then all of a sudden, I was all about Darth Vader. I wanted to be Darth Vader.
Blaming the dark side on puberty. I guess that kind of is apropos.
Right? So, I mean, then the prequels came out, and it kind of brought me back a little bit because I fell in love with Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan. I thought he was a fantastic Obi-Wan through that entire series, and I was just like, oh my God, that is fantastic. Brought me back over to the light side. And then we saw Darth Vader at the end of episode 3, and I was like, yes, no, I'm good. I'll go back over to the dark side.
No.
And, yeah, right. And ever since then, man, it's been so long. It's been so long. But yeah, that took me years and years, and then I kind of fell out of with Star Wars, like kind of that in between, with the prequels and the launch of The Force Awakens. I mean, I'd still watch every single Star Wars movie on May the 4th up until of course The Force Awakens came out, and then I was like, I'm gonna be Kylo Ren. I'm gonna be that guy. And it's been a labor of love, and he's behind me. You can only see like the black kind of there, but yeah, that took me down a whole other rabbit hole, man. I'm telling you. I mean, Lee kind of knows about that. Joining the 501st, and realizing that I can take something that I love, and I just want to hold on to for my entire life and give back to the community with it. And that drove me into joining the 501st, and I've been with them now for 5 years, 4 or 5 years. I don't know. It's been so long. But dude, it's
regional CO.
I love it. I love it.
Aren't you the regional commanding officer?
What's that?
Aren't you the commanding officer of the Imperial Sands Garrison?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm still the commanding officer of Imperial Sands Garrison. My second year in a row.
They trusted you with responsibility.
I know, right? So yeah, I mean, dude, fudge, man. I mean, if you guys could be in my office with me right now, I look up and I see Star Wars ships. I look to my left, there's Star Wars on my wall. I look in front of me, there's Star Wars in front of me. I look to my left, there's Star Wars. To my left, there's Star Wars behind me. I mean, I've got helmets galore. I've got Mandos. I've got Kylo. I've got Vader. I've even got my TIE reserve. There's my hat there. I mean, I'd put it on, but my headphones won't let me put it on. But I mean,
I was so tempted to get my Kylo Ren helmet and just.
I love my stuff, man. I love it. I mean, Star Wars is me. That's me. You want to better understand Shane? Understand Star Wars.
All right, and now last but certainly not least, Lee, what was your first foray? And it's like, what first got you into Star Wars? And
I don't really know how old I was when I first saw Star Wars. I don't remember that, but I do remember it being one of my earliest memories, and I don't remember the whole movie for the first time. And what happened was I I remember it was at the Grove Drive-In, which we used to have a place over by SDSU, which was a Grove Drive-In. And the only reason I know that is because it had a really awesome neon marionette who was, twirling her baton. And that was the animation. And so it was this animated neon thing that, as a little kid, like, ooh. So I remember that. And then I remember Darth Vader entering the Tantive. And when he stepped on, because what I remember as a little kid was all the stormtroopers just mowing down all these rebels, and they are kicking ass and taking names, and then suddenly all of them stopped, get up against the wall, and I'm like, oh, these guys are afraid of something. And then Darth Vader enters the room. And if I wasn't still young enough that I was shitting myself, I'd still shit myself. Because I just remember that Darth Vader entering the room, because I was scared of the stormtroopers. They have this skull-looking face, for their buckets and helmets, and they are just mowing everybody down, except 2 droids who very comically kind of ran across the line of fire.
Hashtag plot armor.
Yeah, plot armor, but plot aim. But all the rebels and stuff, and then Darth Vader, and then they all have fear of Darth Vader, and so suddenly it's like all these scary guys with skull faces are afraid of this other guy who is just jet black, every square inch of him. And I remember just being terrified as a little kid of Darth Vader. And I don't of that first time I saw Star Wars, outside of that opening scene and Darth Vader choking people and just walking onto the set, I don't remember anything from that first time watching Star Wars. I was just absolutely terrified. I wouldn't be surprised if me as a little kid I just hid under a blanket, because it was a drive-in. So I probably had a blanket in the back seat or something, and I just hid. Because it terrified me so much. And then, later on, I think when I was in 3rd grade or whatever, one of my friends said, hey, you want to watch Star Wars? And I was like, yeah. How? And it turned out his dad had set up some kind of like a satellite thing. And, back when satellite dishes were kind of new and whatnot, and he'd managed to actually get a black market version.
New and huge.
Of Star Wars on VHS, and it was crappy, it was grainy, and the moment I saw Darth Vader, I remembered the terror from the first time I saw the movie, except this time I got to sit down and watch the whole movie, as grainy as the sound was. I wasn't, I had that initial shock, and I was like, oh my god, I remember this movie, this scared the crap out of me. And then I got to watch it and absolutely loved it.
I have a follow-up question for you real quickly. Did you have the same terrifying
did I crap myself?
Crap yourself moment when you watched Rogue One and Vader shows up?
Oh no, that was more of a mangasm.
All right.
Like,
also acceptable. Also acceptable.
Yeah, so I just made a stupid face and looked up in joy. So
all right, continue.
But yeah, so that was really my first experience with that. And then for some reason, I'm thinking like later on, I can't remember if it was HBO or something like that, was actually, because my family was poor, and so we didn't get to go to the theaters very often. And I remember we missed Empire Strikes Back in the theaters, but for some reason, I want to say it was like HBO or something like that. One of my friends had HBO. And so he invited me over to watch Star Wars. I think it was HBO, Star Wars and Empire, just before Jedi came out. And so I got to watch those at his house. Again, this time I got to see, Star Wars clear, without all the grainy distortion and, horrible tracking lines and whatnot. But so I got to watch it crystal clear, and again, it just was gorgeous, and the story was amazing. And then of course, I got to watch Empire after that, and I was just, wow, this is really awesome. I can't wait for Jedi. And then of course I was able to get tickets to go see Jedi in the theater, so I was excited. I think that time we went to a walk-in theater, not like Christopher Walken's theater, but like an actual theater you walk into. And yeah, it was kind of, but so that was my first, experiences with all three of those films. And then later on, it was kind of the same thing, like with Shane, is I just and you as well. I got some, my mom was dating a guy who had the VHS tapes, and I watched them until they had the same quality as that downloaded one from the satellite. I just destroyed those tapes, playing them over and over and over again. Memorized every scene, every nuance of design, and it's like I loved Star Trek, but Star Wars was a total different thing for me, because on Star Trek, everything was shiny and new, and it hit me personally more as like CSI in space or something, where obviously CSI didn't exist when I was a kid, but it was but it did kind of hit me as almost like it was a procedural.
Yeah.
So you had diplomacy, and you had, occasionally there'd be romance or something like that. Star Wars really hit me as like one of those old 1940s, or 1950s kind of era war movies, or a Western, and it just happened to be in space,
Yeah.
And everything was beat up, and everything looked worn, and except for the stuff the Empire had. The Empire had all this gorgeous new shiny equipment that was well maintained, and they had the shiny uniforms, and the rebellion, the Republic, they just had the resistance, or the rebellion, they had mixing it up with the resistance, but the rebellion, like they barely had uniforms. Like, it's like, well, it's a close enough color, go ahead and wear that.
The only things that were similar were the flight suits.
Pretty much. Yep. So, and I love that, because you had this very distinct cultures and style and everything behind it. And, as I grew up and I started to love the concept of narrative art more, Star Wars was just the premier example of visual storytelling.
Okay.
And how you can use a set to tell its own story. You can use, a costume to tell its own story about the character who wears it. So, like if the cuffs of the pants are dirty or worn or ripped up or something like that, that lets you know that this, isn't a person who has a lot of different clothes to wear, or, they're very much kind of a rough and tumble or salt of the earth kind of person, where they have a day job kind of stuff. Whereas the rich people had, everything was perfect and clean and crisp, and the stormtroopers always had the absolute pristine armor. They had, basically, stormtroopers had two stages: right off the shelf, mint condition, or a hole blown through them. And that was pretty much the only two settings. There was no scuffy, stormtrooper armor. Nobody had damage or anything. So I just thought that was great use of visual storytelling.
Yeah.
And then the character development, stuff like that, throughout the rest was just amazing. So so that was my Star Wars experience, was just growing up into that and seeing how much that influenced everything else that I loved.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that they ever did was when they released the actual Star Wars encyclopedia, because nobody really kind of had an idea of kind of characters' backstories and stuff like that. That was the first time that I read that how Obi-Wan actually took out Anakin to make him Darth Vader. Like, dude, that whole blip of how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader, basically kind of being thrown into a volcano and basically becoming a rotisserie chicken, is just like, man, that was some like, just going through that and reading that, because I mean, not only was it an encyclopedia, but it was a visual encyclopedia, and it talked about, just the different things, and it talked about, what this component did or what that component did. It explained Vader's life support.
Now, if you're talking about the same books I'm thinking of, it was also like they had the vehicles, they had the characters, each book. So there was a book of vehicles, then there was a book of spaceships, then there was the book of spaceships, like volume 6 or something.
So, and then I want to say probably about, I think it was, oh gosh, I don't know how long afterwards. It was like, I want to say it was like almost, it was around the time they came out with the 20th anniversary edition on VHS that they combined all those into one book. And on the front of it, it just said Star Wars Encyclopedia, and it had the famous, Luke and Vader, from Empire on the cover, but it was all like a chrome style kind of cover and everything. And
that was the really thick one, right?
Yeah. And I think there was, and then that same time they came out with another one. It wasn't an encyclopedia per se, but it was a book of, it was just basically a book of Star Wars, and it was by Steve Sansweet, and he put together this amazing book that had what the original tickets looked like, what the invitations looked like that Lucasfilm sent out for the premieres. It had iron-ons in it from when they had the merchandise, and it had just all this other really, really amazing stuff. I still have the books, of course, but it's just amazing to kind of see that. I would love to see Steve redo that book, but cover from 1977 all the way up to the Rise
or
of
out of
Skywalker.
volume 2, or just where that other book cut off.
Right. Yeah. Have volume 2 cover episode 1 through 3 and all the cool stuff through that, and then 7, 8, 9 and another one. But yeah, that's just, oh my god.
What's funny is that I have a funny funny for me anyways, but Steve Sansweet story.
Nice.
2 technically, but when I first met Steve Sansweet, Linda from the 501st here in San Diego and the San Diego Star Wars Society, they were going up to Steve Sansweet's ranch, which is known as Ranch Obi-Wan. It's the world's largest collection of Star Wars memorabilia. And the current museum didn't exist yet. So the area that the main gallery is in now was a basically kind of a barn, looking thing. And it was full of like Robbie the Robot and, all this space. Like, he collected sci-fi toys.
Yeah.
Everything, not just Star Wars, but a whole bunch of other stuff. And so when he decided that he wanted to build and expand the Star Wars collection, all this other stuff was in the way. So he, invited, a bunch of fans, said, hey, let's go up to Steve Sansweet's house and help him clean out this collection and organize stuff to sell on eBay. And so I went up there with them. And it was funny because at the time I was working for Topps on, I want to say it was the Clone Wars sketch cards for the Clone Wars trading cards that were coming out from Topps. And I had a deadline coming up. But I was like, I really want to do this. I really want to go up there and help clean out this warehouse, this barn of old toys. And so I went up there and I was helping out. And at some point, somebody, basically said my full name. And it was funny because Steve Sansweet stops and he kind of looks at me and he's all like, "You're Lee Kohse." And I was all like, "Yeah." He's like, "Don't you have a deadline?" And I was like, "Yes." And I was like, "But I brought my work with me so I can work on it tonight, or something like that." And he's all like, "Go get it and come here and come back." And so I went to my car, grabbed all the cards and all my drawing kit and stuff like that. And he takes me to not his office, but there's an area that basically has a bunch of flat files that has an art collection. And he, sits me down, clears off a desk, and he's all like, "Sit there and draw, finish your stuff." And so I'm sitting. So basically, Steve Sansweet makes me sit down and finish my Star Wars work. And then he goes to the shelf and he starts pulling out binder upon binder of reference. And he's all like, "Here you go."
That's awesome.
It's like every Topps trading card ever produced. It's every wrapper that's ever been made from, for something related to Star Wars. And it was amazing. I can't remember I don't know if it was Star Wars Galaxy or if it was Clone Wars. But anyway, so I was working on those cards, and I actually drew a significant chunk of the sketch cards I was supposed to turn in to Topps at Rancho Obi-Wan that weekend. And so that that was how I met Steve Sansweet. And then years later, when they were doing the first, this is the second story if we have time. But years later, when Rancho Obi-Wan was put into the world record book, the Guinness Book of World Record, he asked me if I would go up and do sketch cards again. And so I did a couple hundred sketch cards beforehand. I think they said we need like 100 sketch cards. There were 75 or something like that. I forgot what it was. But anyway, so I did a bunch of sketch cards, turned them in, and then I went back up, and then I went there to enjoy the party, basically. So they had this giant, their first annual auction, and kind of like, you know, their annual bash to raise money. So I went there for that, and it was funny because I sit down, we just start hanging out with everybody and chatting and kind of, you know, hobnobbing. And suddenly Anne, who runs the museum, comes up to me and she's all like, "We have a problem. What's wrong?" Well, we decided to keep selling tickets, even though we sold the whatever 75 or 100 tickets here. We put them online, and we sold a bunch more. Can you do another 20 tickets? I was like, "Yeah, no problem." So I grabbed a bunch of cards, went up to that same room, and I started drawing. Now that room was now cleared out, and they were using it for the silent auction. So all the surfaces had auction stuff on it, except where I was working. So I'm sitting there trying to work, and people are just kind of milling in and out. And at some point, it seems like there's like 100 people in this tiny room. I was in the Marine Corps. So one of the things you kind of develop a problem with is having your back to people. And that's just that whole, you know, it's almost like a PTSD thing. So I'm sitting there drawing, and people are bumping me and jostling me, and I'm starting to have this, like, you know, I'm starting to shake, and I'm kind of like, I'm starting to freak out because I have my backs to all these people and I don't know them and whatnot. And it was funny because somebody from the 501st, who was also in the military, immediately saw me, and he saw how I was reacting to the people around me. And next thing I know, a bunch of stormtroopers come in and make an arc around me. Turn their backs to me and face outward, and they go to port arms with their weapons.
Protect the artist.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
He's got work to do. And I'm just like, oh, thank God. And then the funny is, like, as I'm sitting there doing it, eventually I left that desk because it was just, you know, the stormtroopers, God bless them. I was able to get my bearing and go back to drawing again. But then Steve came up, and he's all like, "We have a problem." And I'm like, "The stormtroopers, they're saving my ass." And he's like, no. We sold another 100 tickets.
Oh, no.
So then I end up going into his office. He's like, "I need you to go into the other office." So now I'm in the office with like James Arnold Taylor and Dave Filoni and all the other guys from Star Wars: The Clone Wars, who are there as VIPs for the party as well. And I can't hang out with them. I'm sitting at Steve's desk cranking out sketch card after sketch card after sketch card. Although I did do a Plo Koon for Dave Filoni that night. So, but yeah, God bless the 501st for those stormtroopers for when I started having that weird panic attack, because that's never really happened to me before, because I always sit with my back to a wall. And, you know, so it was a weird thing. I've never experienced that since then, but it was really cool for the stormtroopers to come in and save my ass. So God bless the 501st.
All right.
No, we try. No.
So I guess a question that is often asked of like any Star Wars fan is, what's your favorite?
My favorite Star Wars?
Well, it's like, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? It's like movie, character, what have you. I'm gonna kind of to spice this up a little bit. It's like, what's your favorite, or what's your worst movie? What is your favorite character? What is your least liked character? And what coming out in the future of Star Wars are you most excited for?
To answer the last one, I'll answer the last one first, and that is everything. Both as a Star Wars fan and as somebody who does art for Star Wars. So as somebody who does art for Star Wars, just the fact that new content is coming out and it's good is basically job security. But I love Star Wars so much. In fact, if I was independently wealthy and never had to work a day again in my life, I would work on my own personal IP projects, and I would work on Star Wars. I enjoy drawing Star Wars that much. So, and it's, yeah, I sometimes, look at the stuff that I get to do and just, wow, like I get to work on Star Wars. So I sometimes just, nerd out over that in itself. And then I realize I also have to pay my mortgage. I need to get my head out of my ass and get work on. So yeah, everything coming out, I'm really excited about. As far as my favorite movie, I'm gonna say it sounds really cliche-ish, but I really liked episode 4. Episode 5 is probably my favorite. Episode 4, I love the growth of Luke from, farm boy to budding hero. But episode 4 is really episode 5 is really where you get, that complete, almost complete arc. So Luke is still, still hasn't trained properly. He's kind of bumbling, bumbling for a Jedi, but he's kicking ass as far as everybody else is. And but through his training with Yoda and stuff like that, you see him actually grow and become a Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And has to actually face Vader, and survives, and he makes that judgment call. Join me. Nope, I'm out of here. So and so you have that personal growth of the character, and that moment where he basically sacrifices himself because he jumps off a uncomprehensible height. He doesn't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
he's like, I'm dead, whatever. So he chose, he lived, but obviously at the time of making the decision, he's basically choosing death. So he chooses death over giving up his principles or what he's been trained for. And so to me, that's an amazing story arc. If you talk about like my favorite character, I sort of have to say Han Solo, because he does go through, we first meet him, he's a scoundrel, he's a pirate,
mm-hmm.
and then he's a smuggler, and then he becomes a reluctant hero by the end of episode 4. Episode 5, he's now Captain Solo. He's helping out, he's running missions and stuff, he's leading teams and whatnot, and then of course he has to leave, and or at least they establish that he's he's a great leader in the very beginning, but then he's like, sorry General, I gotta go.
Yeah.
And then of course the adventure ensues, and he ends up getting frozen in carbonite by the end. But then when they free him in episode 6, he's now a general, or he basically becomes a general by the end of the episode. He's now leading ground forces, and so he's taken a major role. So he's done this amazing story arc from bad guy essentially, because he shot first.
Mm-hmm.
So he was not the type of person, he was a scoundrel, and then he develops into this general in the rebellion, fighting for a good cause that's not his own. And then of course with episode 7, the only place for that character to go is essentially martyr.
Yeah. And
so that it is so Han Solo, as far as having an absolute complete character arc, is one of my favorites, hands down my favorite in Star Wars. As far as least favorite movie, I catch a lot of crap for this, but I say episode 8, because there's a lot of people who are just, episode 8 I think is the most divisive of all the movies.
Yeah.
For me, it's a problem because it all comes down to, again, that narrative storytelling. I don't think it did very well as far as world building. So, and also it contradicted itself is kind of one of my biggest complaints, in the sense that the very opening scene of the movie has this amazing, kind of a little bit of humor. It's got this amazing, fight between Poe and of course this dreadnought, and they have to take out, this fleet killer essentially. And it's, they end up losing an entire wing of bombers to defeat it.
Yeah.
And then the end of Act 2, You know, oh, and also, well, I shouldn't say that, but you know, so he like an entire wing of bombers, and then of course Poe is now put on, you know, the naughty list. I almost dropped another S-bomb, trying not to swear for you, but you know, they put him on the naughty list basically because he sacrificed this wing of bomber pilots to accomplish this mission, and the losses were too great. And every time there was a moral lesson, you can't just hop in an X-Wing fighter and you can't solve all your problems by hopping in an X-Wing fighter and blowing things up. Yes, General, I understand. Boom, red alert, red alert. Permission to hop in an X-Wing fighter and blow stuff up. So the moral lesson within 30 seconds becomes a punchline.
Yeah.
And that bothered me. And then, of course, like I said, the end of Act 2 is, you know, Admiral Holdo, who, you know, just met her, you know, in that movie. Like, we just got to know her. She was fairly unpleasant to characters we had grown to like and to know and like prior to. So we liked Poe. We already established Poe was a fun guy in episode 7. He's a good character. We want to see where he goes. And then he kind of gets treated like crap through this whole thing by this Admiral Holdo. And then she, of course, you know, sacrifices herself. And I kind of find myself not caring, because there was no development for me to actually care about that character. And then in particular, the part where the movie contradicts itself is she sacrifices herself by turning the transport and basically firing at warp speed through you know, through Hux's fleet.
Which, beautiful scene. Beautiful scene.
I will tell you this really fast. I'm not an absolute episode 8 hater.
Yeah.
I don't like it because I think the story is disjointed. I think that everything that I left episode 7 wanting more of and loving and just like, oh my God, I want more of the background. I want to know what happened with Luke. I want to know what happened, you know, why is Luke on this island? I want to know why, you know, who are these Knights of Ren guys? You know, I want to know all this great, who are Rey's parents? And every single thing I cared about that left me wanting more Star Wars was kind of blown off. It's not important.
Yeah.
You know, who is Snoke? Snoke dies like a chump. Oh, well, wait, I thought he was supposed to be the big badass. Like, why was there no epic fight, no nothing, just ding, done. And spoiler alert.
It's been a while.
So it bothered me because all the stuff I did, like, I left episode 7, I wanted more Star Wars. I left episode 8, and all I was curious about was, what's that kid with the Force going to do with that broom?
Yeah.
That's all I was left with. Is like, there is a Force using underage child labor janitor out there somewhere. And that was all I was left with. And, you know, but again, I'm not a total hater because episode 8, I think cinematography wise and visually is one of the most beautiful films ever made. That scene, like you said, when Holdo goes through and wipes out Hux's fleet, like, literally just took my breath away. My heart skipped a beat. I just, oh, that was gorgeous. And then later I'm sitting there thinking, why don't they just have ships like that? You stick a little Lightspeed engine with an autopilot computer on an asteroid. Like, if you knew you could do that, why are you making fighters and giant ships and giant fleets? You could just stick an engine on an asteroid and launch it into our planet's being attacked. Launch the asteroids. Problem solved. And so that's why I really don't like episode 8, because it dismantles so much of the world that through so many other movies was meticulously built. George Lucas is one of the greatest world builders. You know, think of the prequels, the hands. You know, the Anakin's hand. It looks like a cybernetic hand. By the time Luke gets one, 20 years later, it looks like a human hand. So the technology has advanced. If you look at the ships and the vehicles and just the way things work throughout the movies, things got better and better and better looking. The one difference, of course, would be things like the ships, because you remember, like Naboo, all the ships were shiny and clean and perfect,
smooth lines.
Exactly. But it was basically the that was a world that had not seen war or conflict.
Right.
And so that's why everything was shiny and perfect. By the time, we get to episode 4, the rebellion has been going on. They're scrapping up old technology and things, and they're rebuilding stuff. So everything looks beat up and worn, except, of course, the stuff the Empire has. So there is, again, it goes to that visual narrative we talked about earlier. Star Wars was, just so great. George Lucas was so great at world building. And then episode 8 just kind of abandoned a lot of that world building, for the sake of a really great scene, beautifully, but it just didn't fit the story. And of course, like I said, the end of Act 2 undid the beginning of Act 1, which basically, and then, the whole thing with Leia, me personally, I've always had the feeling that when the bridge got attacked, when Kylo's forces blew up the bridge of the transport, what is the first thing you as a person do when something's flying at your face?
Block it.
Shoot it. Oh.
If you flinch.
Yeah.
If you were a force user, a powerful force user at that, and even to this day, like I was in the Marine Corps, we did hand-to-hand combat. If somebody grabs me the wrong way, I still have the muscle memory to grab them back in a way that I can retaliate quickly. So I imagine that a Jedi would have the same thing. And so if the bridge, everything around you suddenly explodes, I really pictured Leia flinching and essentially putting a barrier up instantly. And maybe it protects her, and like I would have had it protect Admiral Akbar.
Yeah.
And because Admiral Akbar, again, a character from the previous films, we know him, we love him. We, even the stuff that's no longer canon, he had some great story arcs in the expanded universe. People like that character. So,
and he makes a great meme.
He does. He makes a great meme and a good cereal. Robot chicken joke for you.
Yes.
But yeah. So, but anyways, but I would have had that, and like maybe they come in, they're able to get the door open. They pull her and Akbar before she drops the force field, and then she collapses from exhaustion because it's been a long time since she's pulled a stunt like that.
Yeah.
So it shows how powerful she is, but also shows that she's a little out of practice. And Akbar's there, so that when it's time for somebody to make that grand sacrifice, Akbar makes it instead of Holdo. And I like that idea because I would have been more emotionally tied to Akbar dying in that way, heroically. I'm going to set up a trap, and let him do it. That would be cool.
We're gonna catch him in a trap.
Exactly. Right. What are you going to do? Set a trap. And so he would do it. I would cheer in the theaters. I would not just lose my breath at this beautiful scene. I would then be emotionally tied to the character who sacrificed himself for it. And so that to me would have been great storytelling. But people, to me, it kind of comes down to subverting expectations, which was kind of the catchphrase around the time with Game of Thrones and so many other things. People, we're just trying to subvert expectations. To me, it's almost always a catch-all excuse for lazy writing, personally. And so, yeah, there was just so many other ways that scene could have been handled, or that whole section of scenes, anyways, could have been handled.
Yeah,
and I think it would have been stronger for the story, and it would have been stronger to utilize those characters we know and love. Because that's the other thing, is also characters we love, we kind of just ignored, the entire episode, and pretended they didn't exist or barely gave them any screen time or anything, in lieu of new characters that we're now sort of being forced to like. And I wasn't really into that. It felt like the characters were being forced into me. I thought, Finn was the most underutilized character in that whole series, and it was heartbreaking. I didn't care that Rey was kind of a Mary Sue-ish character. I would have loved to see more of an explanation as to why she was and how she, like what kind of things had happened in her background, and how cool it would have been if Mara Jade was her mom. Right. So there's so much stuff in the expanded universe that could have been brought over, and Dave Filoni does that amazingly well with Mandalorian. So, and also with his Clone Wars stuff, in novels. So yeah,
as you and I've had the conversations about like Mandalorian and Mandalorian and Rebels, it's in particular, it's because I'm like, I have a theory, and then just going balls out with math. It's like, wait, this can't happen. And then I was wrong, and I was okay. I still owe Shane a grilled cheese sandwich for that, by the way.
It's all good. It's all good. You know, that's the thing about Star Wars. You never know what's going to happen. It's a mystery, really.
Oh yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, I mean, the Force is a mystery. So why shouldn't the storytelling be? You know, it's just, oh God. There's just
the funny
so
thing
much.
is I really don't even care about the midi-chlorians. I really because there was a story about the Wills that George wanted to tell, and I'm kind of curious about that. Like, I want to see where that was going, because I always kind of see it like a lot of time. I think that with Mandalorian, you have the only other person besides George who knows Star Wars that well in Dave Filoni.
Yep.
And that's because Dave Filoni spent, 5-6 years working on Clone Wars plus Rebels and even the Resistance and stuff. But, in that time he spent, what has he been working on Star Wars? Like 10 years, 15 years. Yeah. He's been sitting in rooms and at lunch tables and at times in the cafeteria or in the dining room, because there's 2 different rooms of Skywalker Ranch, just talking with George about Star Wars and about storytelling. And and so he does talk a lot in like some of the behind the scenes stuff where he talks about, George would talk about how this is Boba Fett's motivation and this is how this stuff that happened, and that's so his character is kind of this versus the Mandalorian, so he's not really a Mandalorian, he's kind of a foundling thing, and so he would talk about all these things, or why certain factions and whatnot react a certain way within certain groups, but it's pretty much George had all this amazing story in his head, and it's like as I go back and watch The Mandalorian, I'm actually starting to appreciate the prequel trilogy a lot more. Because when Dave Filoni starts talking about, in the behind the scenes stuff, when Dave Filoni's talking about, why he made certain decisions in the story and in Clone Wars and now in Mandalorian and stuff like that. And even Jon Favreau, by the way, everybody keeps talking about, Jon Favreau doing this amazing work on The Mandalorian. Jon Favreau's flat out said it would suck if it weren't for, it wouldn't be as good as it is if it weren't for Dave Filoni.
Yeah.
Because he knows everything. It's like, oh, you know what? Don't hurt yourself trying to create a new character. We had this character in Clone Wars we can use for that. So, he knows so much about Star Wars. And, and he's the only person who knows as much as, I would say almost as much as George at this point. So, having him leading the stories and stuff like that is an amazing asset. And I really wish that they would ping him more often for stuff. Like, if they're going to make more movies and things, run it by Dave Filoni. And be like, oh yeah, try this. By the way, the guy's an amazing artist too.
Yeah, run it by the Star Wars historian, because I think at this point in time that is who Dave Filoni is. All right. Shane, it's like we need to get your take in terms of best movie, worst movie, favorite character, worst character. Oh, Lee, did you give your worst character or?
Oh, worst character. I almost want to say, see, the problem is like everybody always says Jar Jar, but I don't really care. Like Jar Jar. I don't either. It's kind of like it's like an ad roll or something like that. A commercial comes on, you just kind of block it out. I don't know if that's the case or what, but it's like Jar Jar, as annoying as he can be, he did give Palpatine ultimate power, which makes him the root of all evil, and I think that's kind of a redemption arc. So I sort of have to say, as for the reason I already said, it's going to end up being Finn. But not because he's a bad character, but because he just wasn't utilized.
Yeah, not utilized.
Can you imagine? So imagine the Han Solo story arc. Scoundrel, reluctant hero, general, martyr. Imagine a story arc like that with Finn. So Finn leaves the First Order, helps lead the attack against Starkiller Base. Okay, cool. Episode 7 is over. Episode 8, he has he has a fight with Captain Phasma and gets his ass kicked. Or actually, I would probably like have him get his ass kicked in episode 7. And episode 8, he fights her, and it's almost a standstill. He loses, but just barely. And so you could show this character fighting and learning and growing.
Mm-hmm.
And then but it's kind of climactic when you see him at the end of episode 9. I would have had him do some kind of a big standoff fight with Captain Phasma.
Yeah.
And another very unutilized character, Captain Phasma. She's this ultimate badass stormtrooper.
Yep.
And and just she gets thrown in a trash compactor. She gets pushed off a ledge. Or the ledge gives out from underneath her. She's given no good screen time, in my opinion. And I really, really wanted to see more of Captain Phasma. So that's another reason I got another mark against episode 8. But yeah, I wanted Finn to have more. I wanted him to do more, and I wanted that Han Solo story arc for Finn, because that's what he was. He was the bad guy, like literally, he was a stormtrooper.
It was the whole entire. I mean, you and I. It was like I think we've all talked about this before, but it seemed like the Han Solo position was not actually like given to anybody, or it was like split between two characters, which ultimately makes it.
It's like the swagger was given to Poe.
Yeah, the swagger was given to Poe, and the redemption was given to Finn, and neither
never given to Finn.
Yeah. So, Shane, I guess it's your turn to give off your list in terms of.
Oh. Well, let's see. Well, I know my favorite's Empire. I mean, I already talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Least favorite, I'm right there with Lee. Episode 8. I didn't hate it. I mean, I love all Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars guy. I mean, it's everything Star Wars I love. Okay. But
really fast, I'll say episode 8 is a great standalone movie.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It really is. Yeah. And it's the same, same reasons that Lee, is kind of, back and forth with it because of just kind of how everything was handled. It's sad to see, episode 7, like Lee said, at the end of episode 7, you're like, oh my God, you have all these questions like, okay, who's Rey's parents? What's going on with Finn? Because at the end of episode 7, Finn gets taken out by Kylo,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is he ever going to be able to walk again? And then in episode 8, you see him walking down a hallway and I don't even know.
The Michelin Man suit.
Right, and
again, it was one of those things where it should have been a dramatic moment and it was a punch.
Right,
yeah.
And it wasn't. And instead of it should have been Rey seeing him walking down instead of Poe, and it wasn't handled properly. I wish it was, but like Lee said, episode 8 was a great standalone movie. It didn't do anything to progress episode 7 or to hinder what they did in episode 9.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but yeah, I wanted more from Phasma, a lot more from Phasma. I wanted a lot more from Finn. That would have been a great story arc to kind of see them kind of come to some sort of, a better outcome than what happened in episode 8. Like, I would have loved to seen Finn running on, that Star Destroyer at the end of episode 9, and then all of a sudden here comes Phasma down with this freaking jetpack, land in front of him, and 2K, call him by his TK number, right? TK421. Like, dude, that would have been amazing just to have that climax at the end of episode 9 between them two.
Fight!
Right? And that just would have been perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, least favorite character. Oh, that's really a tough one because I really like all the characters. If you asked me this when the prequels came out, I would have said Jar Jar. But as I got older, and two things happened. So I read, if you guys have never read it, I highly recommend it. Nerd Do Well. Simon Pegg's book, about it's kind of like a biography that he did, and he talks about Star Wars in there, and he talks about Episode 1 and how much he hated it, how much he hated George Lucas for it, and how much he hated Jar Jar Binks, and you kind of see that in his TV show that he did a while back. But he's sitting there and he's talking about how he was at this like premiere party or something like that, and he was basically dogging Star Wars, and all of a sudden here's George Lucas in the room.
Oh.
And him and George end up having this conversation, and you know what George said to him, he asked, I think in the book he asked George, for some advice. And George's advice is if you find yourself 20 years later, don't find yourself making the same film that you did 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Like that right there kind of took a lot of the hate away from Jar Jar, because I kind of understood what he was saying there, and he was saying that in reference to that character. And then of course I had kids.
Did his 8-year-old actually create Jar Jar?
What's that?
Wasn't his son like 8 years old and helped create Jar Jar at the time?
I think so. Yeah.
So yeah, it's I figured the original trilogy had Ewoks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It had little, like, primitive Neanderthal Teddy Ruxpins going around kicking everybody's butt.
Yep.
I'm okay with that.
Yep. So then, of course, I had kids, and my daughter, when she first saw Star Wars, was... How young did I start her?
When did they start on the path to the dark side?
4 or 5, and it was on May the 4th, and she watched all 6 episodes with me.
Oof.
And it was the first time that she'd saw Episode 1, and she loved Jar Jar. She thought he was the most funniest thing in the world. He was the greatest character in the world. And at that point, I was like, I get you, George. I get it. I understand what you were saying there, and I understand why you put Jar Jar in these films. Because it wasn't just a movie for us, it was a movie for a new generation of Star Wars fans. And that really kind of drove that home with me. So, I mean, least favorite character, I know I'm probably going to get a lot for it, but Boba. He up until the Mandalorian.
Okay.
It's like
if it wasn't in the movies, Boba, because he was underutilized in the movies, in the books and the comics and everything. Fantastic, phenomenal story arc, like amazing story arc in the comic books and in books. But as a character in a whole in the movies, not so much. And then they brought him into the Mandalorian, and they kind of took what you read in the books and in the comic books and kind of brought it to life, and you're just like,
they mashed it all together and said, right? Here.
Yeah. So
my favorite part, Shane, about the Boba Fett and the Mandalorian was when they brought Robert Rodriguez on to direct that episode.
Yeah.
And told him, yeah, you're going to do the Boba Fett episode. Robert Rodriguez didn't know if Boba Fett was ever going to make another appearance again. So he's like, I am going to make the most epic 20-minute Boba Fett movie I can. And that was his motivation working on that episode, was this must be the most singular badass, or Boba Fett movie you can possibly make.
Yeah.
And mission accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, gosh, favorite character? Right now is Kylo. That's my favorite character right now, because I am Kylo Ren, So, but throughout my life, different periods of my life, like I said earlier, it started out with Luke Skywalker, then it went to Darth Vader, then it went to Obi-Wan, and then now it's Kylo. So, different points in my life, I have, different favorite characters that have, kind of driven me to be the individual that I am, for one. I'm very in the middle. I'm more of a gray Jedi than, on the dark side or on the light side, when I, just kind of when I think about things and how I go about everyday life, it's not, it's not one side or the other. It's, okay, what's in the middle and how can we get everybody right here in the middle and, create that. So, but yeah, it's just, I mean, Star Wars is life. I mean, dude, it really is. I mean, I've
has transcended.
I've read the book of the Sith. I've read the book of the Jedi. I've read the book of the bounty hunters. I've even read the hand guide to the Imperial officer. You know, there's just so much out there, and there's so much that they take and they use the philosophies that they use in these movies relate to real life, which is great. Is which has given it its fandom and why it's been able to stand the test of time. Like, if you were to go back and watch not the special edition cuts, but if you go back and you watch the original cuts of the film without the new special effects and all of that stuff that they added to the special editions, those movies still hold up now as much as they did back then. That's how far ahead of their time that they were with those films.
I personally think they actually hold up better than the special editions do.
They do. They really do.
The CG and stuff in the special editions, with the exception of a couple of scenes, you know, the one I'm always thinking of is like when I forgot the name of it, but the giant dinosaur thing walks in front of the.
Oh yeah.
Looks CG and plasted in. So or just like copy and paste, and to me that doesn't hold up well. But the original, you know, I think the original holds up very, very well.
Yeah, no, that's why I loved episode 7 and episode 9, because they went, you know, especially with episode 7, they went back to utilizing those practical effects, you know, using the miniatures, using the models and stuff like that. And that's what made those films so nostalgic, have that nostalgic Star Wars feel. And, you know, it's easier to, I think, to have those practical effects, because then you can go in with your CGI or whatever, and you can kind of clean up the little areas and stuff like that and make that look more realistic, you know, than just going in and just doing straight CGI. Because once you go into straight CGI, you get to a certain point, especially once, you know, the CGI gets better and better throughout the years, it looks really, 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 really bad. But when you're using the practical effects, it looks real. It stays looking real. There's no, you know, change in what that's going to look like on film.
Well, there's something that like George was talking about when he was doing the prequels, is he was obsessed with using puppets, in particular for Yoda. But if anybody remembers the episode 1 puppet, the original one, really looked kind of creepy. But but one of the things he was talking about is like when you know, a character turns, like their hair flutters, you know, in the case of Yoda, like the ear would jiggle just a little bit. So there was little subtleties to that. So whether it was your hair flopping about, or just like this gentle little flutter of an ear or something like that, there's just this nuance that most people don't notice, and you don't consciously notice it, but your brain sees it and goes, something's not right here.
Oh no,
you snapped a painting out of existence.
I did.
Literally, it's like you snapped your fingers and then boom, that happened.
But just that subtle nuances and stuff of the puppets. You know, it's, you know, it was one of the things George was mentioning, that, you know, you're not consciously looking for it necessarily, but if you don't see it, your brain kind of like, something's not right there. Is kind of what I was trying to get before Boba Fett took a swan dive. So.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I love about what they did with the Mandalorian, especially with Grogu or Baby Yoda. You know, they're using an actual puppet for a lot of the stuff. Yeah, and you see him move and he does stuff, and you see those little, like, his ears like kind of flapping in the wind. It looks realistic and stuff like that, which is fantastic, and I love that. You know, to where if it's not, there's a lot that goes into trying to make a CGI character's ear go, you know.
Well, and you owe that to Werner Herzog.
Yes.
Well, with CGI, it's so hard to do faces because of the uncanny valley principle. And because, I mean, there's just so many. I mean, Lee knows as an artist, and we know by just being a human, there's a whole bunch of like little micro miniature muscle movements that your face makes. And
that's why Superman's upper lip looks so weird.
Yes, and
the lip like the distance basically between the top of your lip and your nose changes based on how you're talking, what words you're saying, whether or not you smile or frown or something like that. And without all the little dots on somebody's face, it's sometimes hard to track those. And so when they just like, oh yeah, we're just gonna paint out the mustache, you know, they CG covered his mustache, but it really didn't work that well because they missed all the subtle nuances of the muscle twitches and, you know, that little bit of gap and stuff like that. The variances in it, essentially. When those are gone, it sticks out.
Yep. And that's why, you know, it's a great segue into video games, because I mean, you know, with the advancement in video games and stuff like that, and how video games are trying to be more theatric, more, you know, movie-like and stuff like that, when you're sitting there and you're still running into that issue where, you know, you have a face character from, you know, a Star Wars game or something like that, and they're speaking, you know, it's still almost like watching an old, you know, Japanese martial arts film where their lips are moving, and then it, you know, and then you get, you know, the last end of the start of the sentence, you know. And, you know, I think that's something that, you know, they've done a great job in taking that technology further, because I mean, when you see them making CGI movies, I mean, take Avatar for, you know, for one, where you've got these actors in these like capture suits, and then all these little freaking dots all over their head, like all over their face, so it can capture that the movement of, you know, because when we talk, I mean, the most animated portion of our body is our face, because it shows you when you're happy, when you're sad, when you're mad, when, you know, when you're confused and stuff like that. And it's all and it's all in your eyes and your eyebrows, the way your mouth moves and stuff like that. So it's just, and it's amazing now. I mean, especially when they did episode 7, and they had what's her name playing Maz. When you go through and you see the behind the scenes of how they captured her face and stuff like that, I mean, she's running around in this gray suit with all those dots on her face, and then she's got 2 cameras just hanging down and, you know, recording her face and capturing it. And it's just amazing on how far the technology has come from that, you know. And it's I'm excited to see how much better that gets, and how that kind of goes into, you know, making characters more emotional, especially CG characters and stuff like that. Was that
kind of the circus for that? The original Gollum for the Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
They had like a certain number of dots or whatever on his face, but then if you look at Gollum in The Hobbit, they like tripled the amount of dots, essentially. And it was something that they realized is that by increasing the number of points that they were tracking, they could increase the realism.
Yep.
So there was this kind of in between those movies, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, there was this fundamental shift in the amount of detail they could capture in motion capture. And it skyrocketed, essentially.
Yep.
So hence why Planet of the Apes and more Andy Serkis work. You know, Caesar looks gorgeous. Like, you know, it's an amazing, like, the effects on that were just holy crap.
Yeah, they were.
And it's like, and how come that man it's like, just a quick question here, how come that man has not won an Oscar yet for, like, well, granted, there probably isn't a category that his acting.
Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yep.
Yeah.
Him, in my opinion, him and Doug Jones, 2 actors.
Oh my gosh.
Ridiculously amazing at a, you know, keep in mind Andy Serkis, you know, playing Claw in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know, I think there was a Honest Trailer or whatever, they were talking about how Andy Serkis was just, you know, he played this maddeningly ecstatic character that was just happy to not be in a mocap suit.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Like, his Claw was just maniacal and brilliant. But just him in general, just all the stuff he's done over the years in mocap and the characters and, you know, the physical, you know, people talk about, like, you know, Sylvester Stallone or, you know, Tom Hanks or somebody like that, putting on weight, gaining weight, you know, Christian Bale, like they'll drop weight and do all these ridiculous things to their bodies for these roles. And everybody gives them all these attention and stuff. And it's like, what about the guys who are killing themselves doing these roles. You know, sometimes Doug Jones is wearing like almost his weight in makeup and prosthetics.
Yep.
And walking around and doing stuff, and he just it's really funny because he plays those characters so well, and I don't know, it's just the physicality that he brings to those characters is amazing. And so I want Andy Serkis and Doug Jones to get Lifetime Achievement Awards for just the amount of hell they have gone through to make such amazingly memorable characters.
I mean, especially with, you know, I mean, Andy Serkis and
You're that Academy.
In Star Wars, you know, with Snoke, what he did with Snoke, and how he portrayed that character and everything. You know, you've got to have great control of your face.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Which really, I wanted to see Snoke pull out a lightsaber and just mow through.
Oh, that would have been fantastic.
Oh, I would have loved that. I would have loved that so much.
Badass that basically was deserving of the menace that Andy Serkis projected in Episode 7. When people are afraid of a hologram, you know, or even in Episode 8, when, you know, using the Force over distance, you know, over a transport, basically, you know, Snoke is kicking Hux's ass.
Well, see, they didn't even tackle that in the comic books because they did a Kylo Ren comic book, and it was basically a 4-episode comic. It's 4 or 5. I think it was either 4 or 5, and it was basically Ben becoming Kylo Ren and going through the Knights of Ren and how he came into, you know, being the Knights, you know, being part of the Knights and stuff like that. And it talks about how he first met Snoke, and, you know, it doesn't kind of give you a backstory on Snoke. I know they've got a comic out there about Snoke, but it doesn't really go too much into his backstory. But it's really, really good. They did a really great job with kind of Snoke came in and was like that father figure that Ben was missing, because, you know, Han was kind of out of the picture and stuff like that. And
well, it would have been
really good.
You know, the Snoke version of the end of Rogue One. You know, so, you know, because if you think about end of Episode 4, you know, it's basically, you know, Sir Alec Guinness, I forgot how old he was when he played that role, but he was certainly not doing acrobats, and they didn't really have, you know, that type of wire work and stuff back then in Western film. So the, you know, epic fight scenes just really didn't exist for the most part back then. So it was, you know, George did the best he could with what he had to work with. And so it really is just two guys with broomsticks going bam, 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 bam. And, you know, by the way, Episode 1 just totally fixed all that. But you know, it would have been cool to, you know, that's Rogue One basically redeems that. You know, it's like when you watch the end and you see, you know, suddenly Darth Vader is worthy of the menace of making a little kid shit himself in the back of his car, you know, when he first enters the room. Because, you know, that really was, you know, it's like you get to see why he is such a terrifying character, because he can walk through a hallway full of people with guns shooting at him, block them with his hand, and then, you know, throw people at the ceiling, slice them in two as they walk by casually.
See, if I saw that, like, you look down a dark hallway and then all of a sudden you see this red lightsaber go, I wouldn't have been turned around and run. I'd just been like, no, I'm out later. I wouldn't even have freaked out. I just walked right out the door, like, not even looked at anybody. I'd be like, y'all on your own. I'm out. See ya.
I'm just a passenger on this transport vessel,
walking really fast.
Yeah, I don't know these guys, man. I don't know these guys. You're all good, man. Yeah, I'll. You want me to show you where they're at? Oh, yeah, let's go. Come on, right down this way.
You take it's like you go down that hallway. It's 2 lefts, then a right, just past the bathrooms. You can't miss it.
Yep. Her name's Princess Leia. She's in all white. She's got a hood on, man. She's gonna have what you want. Go. See ya.
She might have got the on.
Yep. Oh man.
All right. Well, Gentlemen, we are at an hour and we're over an hour in terms of talking Star Wars, and we still have more stuff to cover. So, do we want to save this for a part 2 and talk about it later? And also, Lee, I might need you to make a disclaimer. It's like the company that you work for is Lucasfilm, not LucasArts, correct?
Yes.
All right.
I can't tell you how many times I've been introduced somewhere. It's like, and LucasArts artist. No.
And and somebody's asking for, or somebody's trying to garner attention. So,
are you being cat mobbed again?
I'm always being cat mobbed in my office. It's the thing about owning cats.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, because we still have yet to talk video games, and I could edit this into into 2 1-hour things. So do you want to talk video games for the next 15 minutes? And
it's easy. Video games is easy to cover. I mean, you think about it. I mean,
well, yeah.
You got Lucasfilm Games is back, which is amazing, and they made the announcement that EA is no longer having exclusivity for it, and which means we're going to get a vast amount of video games that are going to be coming out that are going to be really good. I hope.
One video game series that I would not mind them revamping is Star Wars TIE Fighter and Star Wars X-Wing. I would not mind a revamp of those 2 games.
Just resurrect new versions of all the Nintendo 64 stuff.
Right.
Or that. I mean,
well, that's why you got Squadrons. Squadrons is basically giving you that.
Versions. Or better yet, just new versions, just give me full-blown new versions with modern, game mechanics and stuff like that. Well, you can keep the same story if you want, but...
Right.
The thing is, though, Shane, in terms of the storyline that they gave you in Squadrons, there were elements that were not available in TIE Fighter. Like, there was the whole entire... If you completed secondary objectives in Star Wars TIE Fighter, like, you were chosen to be one of the Emperor's, like, inner circle, and you got, like, tattoos.
Yeah.
As you progress, and I'm like, I want the best one possible.
I'd like to see them redo Rogue Squadron. That game is amazing. I love that game. Rogue Squadron and Rogue Squadron 2. Those were just phenomenal games. And
it's been so long since I've been able to play a Star Wars video game. I am so really, other than it's just been a while since I played a Star Wars game. I bought Squadrons a little bit after it came out. And I still haven't been able to play it. It's still shrink wrapped.
Oh no!
Oh man, I bought it.
Swamped.
I bought it for my PC because I have the VR, and it is by far one of the best VR games I've ever played in my life. It is just so immersive and just so well done. And I bought it again for my Xbox just to go through it on the Xbox just to see what it's like, on a console, and it's just as good, But they put so much into that, and it was a welcoming game to all of us Star Wars fans that we've wanted and stuff like that. There's a few things that I wish they would have put into it, but it would have taken away from the story that they were telling. But I'd like to see Rogue Squadron done in that style and going through, I just want to take out AT-ATs, man. That's all I'm asking. I just want a snow speeder so I can take out some AT-ATs. That's all I'm asking. But no, I'm excited for Ubisoft, man. Ubisoft makes some of my favorite games with Assassin's Creed, my new favorite, Rise of Phoenix, or Immortals Rise of Phoenix, and they do a great job with those games. And I don't want them to give me an Assassin's Creed Star Wars game, but I wouldn't hate it, But I wouldn't mind seeing a game about a Sith. We've already done the good guys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, keep in mind, an Assassin's Creed Star Wars game might just be Andor.
Right.
So a nice Andor story.
Yeah.
Be James Bond / Assassin's Creed in the Star Wars universe.
I would love to see a Sith game. Just I don't care what character. If you want to take me back to the Old Republic and give me a Sith from that time, I don't care. You can go from the Old Republic all the way up until, I mean, you can give me a Sith after Episode 9. You know, give me the rise of a new protagonist or something like that, you know, but I would love to see something like that. You know, but yeah, I can't wait to see what they do. And I mean, now that they did that, I mean, they opened the flood doors for some great content that they can bring in. It's very, very heyday of the 90s when they went from being Lucasfilm games in the 80s, and then they changed over to LucasArts in the 90s. And when they did that, they kind of opened it up to let other developers kind of make Star Wars games, but under the LucasArts banner. And
I also want to
just, oh man,
what's that, Lee?
The old adventure games and stuff,
like Monkey Island and Grim Fandango,
Full Throttle. Oh yeah, I'd love to see updated ones.
Same thing.
I think the one, because didn't LucasArts also make Leisure Suit Larry?
I think so, possibly.
I'm gonna have to look that up because I think they did.
I haven't thought about Leisure Suit Larry since like 2000.
Because
they just came out with a new game.
2002, something like that. But yeah, so for me, it's, you know, granted it was a conversation we had before the podcast, but it was like the whole idea, exclusivity is a two-edged sword kind of thing. So like for the majority of the work I do, for at least the stuff that goes to the art galleries and stuff, that's all handled by a company called Acme Archives. So they have the exclusive rights to do Star Wars fine art, essentially. So all the stuff you see in the art galleries that's Star Wars comes from Acme Archives. And then if you buy something from Sideshow Collectibles, you're buying it from Sideshow Collectibles. Sideshow Collectibles paying that licensing fee to Acme Archives, who is basically, they have that exclusive contract with Lucasfilm. Right. So they control all of that, essentially. And I like that because it means that the quality control is very high. They try to get really good art in there. They try to get really good artists in there as well. So it can be kind of competitive at times. And it's you know, I think it's that exclusivity in that regards is a benefit. Also because, you know, if you're getting one of these, you know, prints like this, you know, these are like $300-400 prints. So they, you know, there is a premium behind that quality. And, you know, they're officially licensed with certificates of authenticity, so like that. But it's also online. We're competing against people who have JPEGs and stuff like that, just high resolution JPEGs even, or fan art and stuff like that. You know, essentially unlicensed, you know, or unofficial artwork. So, you know, doing the officials. So if you want to collect stuff and you collect the official stuff, you know you're going to get something quality, which I really like. So it works. That exclusivity works for the fine art industry, I think, in as far as Star Wars goes. With the video games, I think it made the company lazy. Not Disney, but I think it made Electronic Arts kind of lazy, because to them it was essentially nobody else can make Star Wars games, so we're just going to make Star Wars games. It's almost like fulfilling a contract. Yeah. You know, for anybody who ever saw, in which case I apologize. Not that I'm sorry for you, I just feel sorry for you. That I'm responsible anyway. But if you saw the original Captain America movie from the 80s, or the Fantastic Four movie, stuff like that, the Roger Corman stuff, those were basically made just to fulfill a contract. So they were made for like $1 million or less, essentially, and they were only made for the sole purpose of trying to make sure that the rights were secured so they can sell them again later at a higher price to somebody else, kind of stuff. So, you know, you end up with, if you end up in these exclusive contracts, you end up in those type of scenarios where the audience is hungry for content, nobody else can make it, you don't put that much effort behind it. People are going to buy it no matter what. So they know they're going to make money. And so the quality level, I think, of Star Wars games has actually declined over the years. getting rid of the exclusivity, though, now everybody's going to competing to see who can put out the best Star Wars game, who can give you the best content. And
I think
you won't
kind of
microtransactions and stuff like that.
Battlefront,
like that.
Looking at you.
Yeah.
So if you try, microtransactions and stuff, and it angers the fan base, they're gonna revolt and go somewhere else. They're gonna give their money to another company. They're gonna give their money to Ubisoft, essentially.
Right.
But like I think we'd had a conversation before where I'd mentioned to you that I'm okay with microtransactions in the sense of like Overwatch.
Yeah, where it doesn't actually affect your gameplay. Here's something pretty.
Yeah.
Purely cosmetic. Somebody having a prettier gun does not give them a technological advantage over me as far as gameplay goes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's all going to come down to character selection and game skill, which is really what it should be when you're doing PvP type stuff. So, and even PvE to an extent, it's, when people have these things where it's like, you can't possibly win this game you just paid $60 for unless you give me another 99 cents every 20-30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've gone to a new thing, and it's like, oh well, gee, I wish you had this key, or something, and the only way you can get it is to buy, is either grind for hours and weeks and days, whatever, months,
and then hope that you get it in the random loot boxes, or just buy it.
Yeah, but if it's not game dependent, if it's just cosmetic, I don't care, because then you just end up with, you end up with people who just, I really want that shiny thing, and I have to do it. But getting my ass kicked by somebody who just has a better budget than me and less time on their hands, it sucks.
Oh, and I was incorrect. Leisure Suit Larry was not made by LucasArts game company, or at least it's not on their list.
It was made by Sierra Games.
Yeah, it was made by Sierra Games, which is I'm a fan of that company just due to the Sierra City Building series. That's the reason why it's stuck in my brain for some odd reason. But continue.
Yes. But yeah, so it, again, microtransactions that don't affect gameplay, I'm okay, because those are personal choices. I didn't spend 60, give me a free game that has microtransactions, but also, that make the game easier to play maybe, but doesn't have, but it's, what are the thing? I can remember those, like some cell phone games that I've played. I can't remember the name of them, some Star Wars. But it was free to play, but sometimes you would be like, okay, you gotta grind to keep doing all this stuff, or you can buy a bunch of coins or whatever, a bunch of credits, and buy the stuff you need to speed it up. But it's a free game, so they've got to pay for it somehow. I'm a little more okay with that. I prefer not to do it in general, but it is a free game. It is. But yeah, if you're paying $60 for a game, just the microtransactions should not.
They should not. They should not be dependent on your success of the game. Yeah, totally. 100% agree.
Yeah, it drove me crazy. But you kind of saw, once that they announced, Lucasfilm Games was coming back and stuff like that. They announced that before last year. That was rumblings around in the rumor mill like 2-3 years ago when Battlefront 1 came out, and they started working on Battlefront 2, and how much of a disappointment the first Battlefront was because of the microtransactions and stuff. And Disney was talking about bringing back Lucasfilm Games and stuff like that. And then you had Battlefront 2 come out, which was it was a step up from the first game, because you had a storyline, a really good storyline, that I think everybody really enjoyed playing through. And then you kind of saw where it was like EA was like, oh crap, they weren't kidding, they're bringing back Lucasfilm Games. And then you got Fallen Order, and they took it away from the guys that did Battlefront and gave it to the team behind Titanfall, which is the team that, the original guys that did Call of Duty back for Activision. And they, there's a whole drama thing before that. That's a whole other podcast. And they did a great job with it. They took original characters, put them in the Star Wars universe, and made it feel like Star Wars, which was fantastic. Yeah. And it was a storyline in between Episode 3 and A New Hope. And it gave you these new characters, and it brought the Inquisitors in, and just all this fantastic storytelling in this game. Now the controls were mediocre at best. You know, there was some great combat stuff, but there was also some platforming stuff that just did not work. It was like, you know, they try to take a lot of the controls from Titanfall and make it in a third person, which unfortunately some of it worked and some of it didn't work. But then you get a game like Squadrons, which is just probably one of the best flight simulators I've ever played. And I've played a lot of flight simulators in my time. And, you know, they did a fantastic job with the VR on it. And that came to fruition because they had the team that did the VR for the PlayStation for the original Battlefront game do this one. And they basically took what they learned from doing that one small level or episode that you want to call it, and turned it into what Squadrons is, by kind of giving you almost, you know, full control of your TIE fighter or your X-Wing or whatever, you know, ship that, you know, that you want to fly. The only thing was missing was realistic flight controls.
Yeah.
You know, being able to control everything like you would in, like, you know, like a Microsoft Flight Simulator or something like that. But I think that would take away from it. So what they did with it, being able to drift in space like Poe did, and being able to, you know, change your power levels. Okay, I'm going to focus on my shields, and I want my shields to be 100% up front, because I'm going to go try and take down this Star Destroyer, or
and I'm gonna need a buffer.
Right, you know, or I want my cannons to be stronger, so I'm going to switch over and make sure that I have all my power going to that, and that takes down your power for your shields and your speed. Or hey, I got to catch up, I got to chase down this.
I gotta go fast.
I gotta go fast, so I'm going to move it up to speed. And I think they did a wonderful job with that, and really made you. It brought a new element to the game, you know, because it, instead of just flying around and just shooting stuff, you're like, oh shoot, let's see, what am I going to want to use here? What am I going to want to use here? Okay, I need to make sure that I know my controls here and be able to do this.
And it did also bring a different perspective in terms of like how you thought of the Empire versus how you thought of the Rebels. Because the Empire is like, if you flew, it's like if you flew Imperial, you didn't have shields. You just had speed, and you had engines, and you had weapons. Yep. You had shields on one ship, and that was a support ship. It's like if you were flying Rebels, shields on every ship.
Yep.
Because one, it's like, okay, the Empire can crank out this stuff at a faster rate, so there is no need for shields, and they have more They have more human resources, literally, to kind of throw at the problem.
Yeah.
And it's all built by lowest bidder.
That too. As is probably like a good chunk of government contract work. It's like, who's the lowest bidder?
So you know, with that, you know, just going into these new. What was that, Lee?
I was saying, well, whereas the stuff the Empire was using is basically lowest bidder, and then the Rebels were all using stuff that was just tried and true. It was stuff that had been through the ringer a lot, but was easy to maintain. You know, had performed well, had a history of performing really well because it was still around, hadn't been blown up yet.
No.
And also, it's like Empire had to take into consideration size, like how many TIE fighters can fit into it. It's like how many starfighters can fit into a Imperial Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
Because remember, X-Wings had their own hyperdrives.
That too.
They didn't have to be on the ship.
Nope.
They could launch the planet hyperdrive with the fleet.
Yep. Where TIE fighters had to be, basically attached to a ship in order to do that. So yeah, that was I love that aspect. And just with
world building.
It all comes back to world building.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, I'm excited for the future of Star Wars games, man. I mean, I think the past two games that they came out with the Fallen Order and with Squadrons has laid some pretty good groundwork, and kind of shown you that there is a bright, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, and also
for Star Wars games.
Also, how is it going to tie into the current Star Wars universe as we see it now? Because that's one of the things that, maybe not everybody watched The Mandalorian. Maybe not everybody watched, or played Fallen Order. Maybe not everyone played, but the whole entire thing, it's like, and Disney has been doing a very good job in terms of weaving the web of their universes so they actually meld together rather than be this whole entire butting heads type thing.
Yeah,
you can't blow up a planet in one property that you're using in another one.
Exactly.
That whole control of continuity thing. But by the way, that's why Disney kind of made that decision to get rid of the expanded universe when they bought LucasFilm. And keep in mind, when they said they got rid of the expanded universe, they didn't get rid of it. They didn't go house to house, grab all your books and your old games and your comics and burn them. They just said these aren't canon. So
it's part of the Legends series.
Well, but that was one of the things that always bugged me was when Disney bought them, like the fans just went in this uproar over things like Knights of the Old Republic and stuff like that, or not Knights of the Old Republic, I'm thinking Dark Empire, stuff like that, the Timothy Zahn books, which much beloved, were no longer canon. So they got really mad, and it's all like, yeah, but you can still read them. They may not be canon, it's a label. It's just a sticker on the outside of something for the most part. You can still read it, enjoy it. And it's authorized fan fiction at this point. And it's still, and I will still read those books, and I will still love them as much now as I did when I read them then, and when they were canon. And so I never understood the outrage that some people had about, they took our Star Wars away. And it's like, no, it's still on your shelf. You can go read it anytime you want.
Yeah. No, and that's the one thing that I love that Filoni's done with, the Clone Wars, with Rebels, with, the Resistance, and, now with the Mandalorian, is you're bringing back these characters that we loved in Legends. Like he's like, they didn't throw them out. They just gave us a blank canvas to make these characters even more than what they were.
Thing of Dave Filoni, not to throw the prequel trilogy under the bus, but that's one of the genius things between, what the Mandalorian's done and what episode 7, 8, and 9 did. Was 7, 8, and 9, you really only had Luke, Leia, and Han, and Chewie, and C-3PO. So you had the kind of that group of that core group of characters from the original trilogy were there, but nothing else was familiar. And whereas the with something like the Clone Wars and Rebels, Dave Filoni actually went into the Timothy Zahn novels and said, okay, well, Grand Admiral Thrawn's no longer canon. I like that character. I'm going to use it. And yeah, his origin is now different, and it's he doesn't have the little the little force-proof ferret things.
Force ferrets, give me force ferrets.
I know that they were cute and adorable, but there were these creatures, and for those who don't know, there were these creatures, the Yasiri, or unpronounceable word almost. But they were essentially, they protected whoever was near them. Like they had an anti-force bubble around them, pretty much. And so Thrawn would use them so that Jedi couldn't come out of nowhere and just force push him or read his mind or whatever, take control of him. So, but that was kind of a neat aspect, and I would love to see something like that brought in, maybe someday. But at least I got Thrawn, right? And that's why I was really bummed when they came out and said, "Oh, we didn't have anything to really pull from for episode 7, 8, 9." I was like, Mara Jade was in the same book Thrawn was.
Yep.
Bring her in. I would love to see that, or Dark Empire. But I would love to have Mara Jade in the not in the expanded universe, but in the movies or something. I think that'd be great. And a beloved character, by the way. So.
All right, gentlemen. I think that's our time for today or tonight. Thank you, Lee, for taking the time to sit here and chat Star Wars with us. It's always a pleasure because I always go.
I think we always go overboard, and we could literally talk this for the next 5-6 hours.
Yes.
One of the things we talked about before, why I love George Lucas, not just the storytelling and stuff, because I think a lot of times people give him a bad rap. So when he sold Star Wars, to Disney, he sold it for like $4.4 billion or whatever it was, $4 billion.
A lot of money.
It was a lot of money. People were like, "Oh, he just did it for the money." Well, keep in mind that shortly thereafter, he also started a scholarship fund, and I believe it was funded with $4.4 billion. So the money he made from Star Wars immediately went towards teaching people who want to learn about cinema and all aspects, like music, score, production design, directing, storyboarding, concept art, like every aspect of making films, I believe, is what that scholarship's for. And then, like with Episode 5, when Empire Strikes Back came out, once George had recovered his original $33 million, the next $5 million he made was split among everybody who worked on the movie. And a $5 million bonus for no particular reason. Then, hey, you guys stuck with me through this weird, crazy adventure. Here you go. So, and then of course there's these world's largest middle finger to rich people that he pulled up in Marin County, which I loved. So, I think something like that. There's a lot of reasons to love George Lucas as a filmmaker, but I think there's also a lot of reasons to love him as just a good human.
Oh yeah.
So why I am a George Lucas fan.
But I mean, Shane, you were absolutely.
I wanted to throw that in before you close.
No worries. It's like all three of us could talk Star Wars till we're blue in the face and have like no other option. Like, I'm pretty sure it's like I might be fairly certain. Like my last dying words might be something of Star Wars related.
Right. Shot first.
And everything else. To those of you out. To those of you out there, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the video. It helps out the channel. Be sure to check out Lee on his social media. That's all posted in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, as well as the description down below. Thank you for joining us. Thank you again, Lee, for coming in and talking Star Wars. I always enjoy these conversations just for the sake of, I always tend to look at Star Wars differently after like one of these in-depth conversations.
Thanks. I'm glad it's worth it.
But it's like it's always in a very different way, and it's always positive, and I just enjoy everything about it. So
I love it. I love it because I know a lot about Star Wars, right? but so does Lee. So every time we talk about Star Wars, I always find myself learning something new from Lee that I didn't know, because he's kind of got the inside scoop on and understanding, and because that's what he does for a living, right? So it's like whenever we have these conversations, and it's like, I mean, we've had these conversations before, and they've gone to the wee hours of the morning, and
3-4 a.m. your wife coming in going, go to bed.
right and that's what I love about these things, because I mean it's a share of something that we all love, and that we can talk about it, and that I'm always learning something new, even though I know a lot about Star Wars. I don't know everything. So and I appreciate Lee coming on and sharing your experiences with Star Wars, and kind of how it shaped you into being the artist that you are today. And it's definitely
and really fast, because you kind of mentioned it, is like, for me, fandom is all about being positive. So it's easy to be negative. That's why there's so many YouTube channels out there of people talking smack, because it's easy to do.
Yeah.
It is so easy to be negative. It's so easy to get people riled up. There's entire media companies designed for no other reason than just get people riled up.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's like, who wants to be angry all the time? Who wants to be upset all the time? It's just, be happy. It's you're a fan, love something. If it's not, again, Episode 8, good example. It's not my favorite Star Wars movie, but you know what? There's still a lot in it that I love.
But the Hulk is always angry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hulk is always angry.
Yeah, but you know what? What I like about Hulk is he's really good at inducing recycling.
That's also true.
So always a silver lining. Hulk smashed your car, upgrade. Insurance the Hulk cover, sure. So, but yeah, it's always find that silver lining, and you're a fan of something because you love it, not because you love talking crap about it. Just enjoy it. If it's not perfect, go back to the stuff you do love that is perfect for you. So the people who don't love the prequels, you don't have to watch the prequels. Watch the original stuff. Watch all the stuff you loved before. It's still going to be there. There's no reason to stop.
Real quickly before we say our final goodbye, the character that I do not like the most is actually a series of it's a character progression. I do not like the character progression of Anakin Skywalker in the prequels, just because the fact of the matter is his age doesn't make sense. You start off with little kid, then Hayden Christensen, and he's the same guy over and over again. It's like, come on, it's like I can understand Hayden Christensen in Clone Wars, but get somebody else for Revenge of the Sith. My favorite character is Darth Maul, because I loved him in the prequels, and I'm like, I want more information. I was
hoping you were going to say you loved him to pieces.
Loved him in the prequels. Loved him to pieces. There we go. My favorite Star Wars movie, I would have to say, is Episode 4, just because it's the thing that launched it all for me. And then my worst one is actually Episode 9. I kind of felt, and maybe it's from Episode 8 that I felt there was a disconnect. There was a whole bunch of fan service that I didn't believe that needed to be in the movie itself. And yeah. So
we can't be friends anymore. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, for me, I would say Episode 9 is probably my second least favorite. And it's kind of like for that same reason. It is, if they spend the first, hour of that 3-hour movie essentially trying to sort of undo Episode 8. So it's like the first 30% of the movie is basically an apology, it seems like. And that's kind of why I, as standalone movies, they're fun. I still love Star Wars. I'm much like Shane. It's like the bad ones I will still keep watching.
I'm not going to not watch Rise of Skywalker when it comes on.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that all Star Wars fans can agree with that you don't ever watch is the holiday special.
You watch that, but you make it a drinking game.
I like this idea. I like it.
You have to be either drunk or lit. When VR comes on, you're like, whoa.
All right. It's like, and with that, we have to say, please drink responsibly.
Medical advice.
All right. Gentlemen, again, thank you for joining me. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Follow us on social media. My name is Brennan, the Nerd of Many Faces. This has been Lee Kohse, and that has been Shane Hawley. Lee Kohse's all information down there. Shane is at FDScosplay. Thank you so much. Wish you a good night, and we'll see you at the next round table. Bye.
Peace out. Oh, by the way, join Guy on Twitch. And Shane occasionally when he remembers to tune in.
All right. Catch you later, gentlemen.
Right.